I heard my future son-in-law's voice through a thin mahogany wall, and one sentence turned my blood to ice. He told his sister they didn't need the fabric swatches today, because the old man was clueless enough to sign a medical power of attorney at the rehearsal dinner. I didn't confront them that day. That was the mistake they never recovered from. My name is Harrison Gallagher. I am 70 years old, a retired structural engineer who spent 40 years building skyscrapers across Texas. I know how to spot a hairline crack in a foundation long before the entire building collapses. But I never saw the fatal crack in my own family until I stood frozen in that dark fitting room. My daughter Maya was 32, running her own art gallery, and the center of my universe since my wife Martha passed 7 years ago. She was engaged to Preston, 35, flashy, a self-described tech investor from the East Coast. Something about him always felt too polished, but Maya looked at him like he hung the moon, and I was paying for the entire wedding because I wanted to give her the world. 4 days before the wedding, I went to Dominic's tailor shop for my suit fitting. Dominic had been my friend for 25 years. The moment I walked in, his face went pale. He locked the front door, shoved me into the darkest fitting room, and told me not to make a sound no matter what I heard. Minutes later, Preston and Valerie, his supposed older sister, walked into the next room, separated from me by an inch of wood paneling. Preston laughed, low and arrogant. He said the old man was clueless, that he'd signed the medical power of attorney thinking it was just tax paperwork. Valerie replied that as soon as the ink dried, the $10 million life insurance policy would activate. Then she said the words that stopped my heart. Maya will not survive the hiking trip in the Swiss Alps. It's a tragic accident waiting to happen, and you'll be the grieving widower holding all the cards. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I let the darkness swallow my shock and turn it into rage. I drove straight to Maya's penthouse, ready to tear the truth open with my bare hands. But Preston never flinched. He calmly laid out documents on the kitchen island, explained the insurance as a mortgage requirement for a mansion he was buying her, called the Alps trip a romantic surprise, complete with professional guides. He twisted every fact so smoothly that for a second even I doubted myself. Maya turned on me instead. She said I'd become paranoid and controlling since her mother died, that I was trying to ruin the only beautiful thing she'd built for herself. She screamed at me to leave. Preston wrapped his arms around her, kissed her head, and over her shaking shoulder, he smiled at me. A slow, knowing smile. The smile of a man who believed he'd already won. Walking out of that apartment, I understood something. Fighting him in the open would only push Maya further into his trap. If I kept pushing, she would cut me off completely, and she would die on that mountain. I had no evidence, no allies, and no time. But I knew exactly how ruthless a loving father could become. That night I didn't sleep. An engineer doesn't attack a fortified wall head-on. He finds the stress points. The next morning I called Maya and lied, my voice trembling, blaming my outburst on grief. She softened and invited me to Sunday brunch to make peace. Preston, thinking he'd already won, encouraged it. At the country club, I stopped talking and started observing. Preston wore a gold Rolex he called a family heirloom, but when the sunlight hit the dial, the second hand ticked instead of sweeping. A cheap quartz fake, just like the man wearing it. Then, dropping my napkin, I glanced under the table and saw Valerie's bare foot stroking Preston's thigh. No sister does that. And Maya, my vibrant daughter, sat pale, sluggish, staring at her food with vacant eyes, struggling to answer simple questions. They were drugging her. Every instinct screamed at me to flip the table right there, but I had no proof, only a fake watch and a glance under a tablecloth. If I called the police that day, they'd see a father making wild accusations, and Preston would accelerate everything, take Maya somewhere I could never reach her. I needed hard, irrefutable facts, bank records, chemical analysis, a documented trail no judge could dismiss. I withdrew $100,000 in untraceable cash and found Victor Thorne, a former federal investigator forced out for his ruthless methods. I told him everything: the fitting room, the fake watch, Maya's frightening condition. He didn't blink. He asked who we were destroying. To buy time, I told Maya I was flying to Florida to cool off and clear my head. Preston, thrilled to have me out of the way, encouraged it warmly. Instead, Victor chartered a private jet to Boston, to the address printed on Preston's wedding invitations, the address of his family's supposed historic estate. It was an abandoned strip mall, boarded windows, broken glass, a dead storefront that used to sell discount liquor. Victor traced a network of shell companies from that address to a Dallas bank account, funding Preston's entire fabricated life. The sports car, the tailored suits, the illusion of wealth. Then his face changed. He'd found a Nevada marriage certificate, 8 years old. Preston and Valerie weren't siblings. They were legally married, husband and wife. Worse, cross-referencing old warrants, Victor uncovered Preston's real identity, Thomas Vance, a convicted con artist who had already killed once. 2 years earlier, his previous wife drowned on their Miami honeymoon, under suspicious circumstances, and he'd walked away with a $5 million insurance payout. This wasn't a new scheme. This was a refined, repeated method. Maya wasn't just a target. She was his next kill, a bigger prize, the same playbook. While we absorbed this, my phone buzzed. A text from Maya. Preston was moving the Swiss Alps trip up by 2 days, leaving right after the reception. Our window had just slammed shut. We had less than 72 hours to save her life. Back in Dallas, while Preston and Maya were out for a cake tasting, I broke into the penthouse using knowledge from decades of designing security systems. Behind a hidden panel in his office wall, I found a fireproof safe. Inside, a burner phone and an amber bottle labeled Maya's supplements, filled with unmarked blue capsules. I took 2 pills for testing and got out just as they returned, hiding in the emergency stairwell. Through the cracked door, I heard Preston on the burner phone say, "The dosage is perfect. Her heart rate is dropping. It will look exactly like altitude sickness." A toxicologist confirmed the horror. The capsules combined a powerful beta blocker with a fast-acting sedative, a combination that would look like mild exhaustion at sea level, but would trigger fatal cardiac arrest at high altitude. Undetectable, untraceable, designed to look like a tragic natural death in the mountains. I nearly lost control right there in the lab, ready to drive back and tear Preston apart with my hands. Victor stopped me physically, reminding me that if I killed him now, I'd go to prison, and Valerie would vanish with everything, leaving Maya alone and unprotected. We had to destroy them legally, publicly, permanently. I became 2 people. One smiled at family dinners. The other built the file that would end everything. I took the medical power of attorney to my attorney, Richard, who turned pale reading the fine print, calling it an ironclad death warrant, disguised as routine paperwork. I told him not to block it. I needed Preston to feel he'd already won completely. Instead, Richard buried a hidden poison pill clause inside a separate trust document Preston would also sign, one that would instantly void the power of attorney and freeze every account tied to his name the moment his pen left the paper. Then I called in a 20-year-old favor from FBI Field Director Marcus Thorne. I laid out the toxicology report, the fake Boston address, Thomas Vance's real criminal history, and the Florida drowning. The Bureau agreed to a full sting operation at the rehearsal dinner. Agents disguised as catering staff and lighting technicians, hidden cameras wired throughout the ballroom. The rehearsal dinner arrived. 150 of the city's most influential guests gathered, completely unaware they were about to witness the collapse of an elaborate murder plot. Preston stood, tapped his glass, and with theatrical warmth, slid the trust portfolio and a gold pen across the table toward me, expecting the broken old man to sign away his legacy in front of everyone. I let the silence stretch. Then I stood, pulled the microphone closer, and spoke about 40 years of building skyscrapers, and how a structure built on a lie always collapses under the weight of its own deception. I told the room that the document in front of me wasn't a trust agreement. It was a death warrant, engineered by a man who'd perfected this exact scheme long before he ever met my daughter. I pressed a button on my phone. Every light in the ballroom went dark. A projector clicked on behind us, filling the wall with the Nevada marriage certificate. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Then came the Florida newspaper clipping of Preston's drowned first wife. Then the toxicology report, side by side with a photograph of the poisoned capsules, labeled with my daughter's name. Valerie bolted for the kitchen doors and ran straight into Victor, who pinned her against the wall. Preston, cornered and unraveling, vaulted the table and lunged at me, expecting the frightened old man he'd dismissed all evening. Instead, I swung the solid oak cane I'd been leaning on all night, the one he'd mistaken for a feeble prop, and shattered his kneecap in one strike. He collapsed screaming. Even on the floor, he sneered that I had nothing, that he hadn't actually signed anything yet. I leaned down and told him he was focused on the wrong trap entirely. 3 days earlier, I'd broken into his safe, found his real poison, swapped it for harmless placebos, and handed the actual pills and his burner phone straight to the FBI, complete with his fingerprints and messages. He had confessed to his own attempted murder without ever realizing it. Federal agents stormed in and dragged Preston and Valerie out in handcuffs. Maya, the drug fog finally breaking under the shock of adrenaline, watched the entire truth unfold on that screen and collapsed sobbing into my arms. A year has passed. Preston and Valerie took plea deals to avoid the death penalty and will spend the rest of their lives in federal prison. Maya's gallery is thriving again, brighter than ever. Every Sunday morning we sit together on the porch with coffee, slowly rebuilding what almost broke completely. I didn't just save my daughter's life that night. I got my best friend back from the edge of the abyss. To any parent listening, predators don't wear warning labels. They arrive looking exactly like everything your child has ever wanted. If someone enters your family, and the dynamics turn toxic overnight, don't step aside quietly. Investigate. Gather your evidence in the dark. It's better to be the villain in their eyes for a month than to mourn them for the rest of your life. If you were in my place, would you have confronted them that day, or waited until you had proof? Tell me in the comments.